Welcome back. You're watching Network Africa. According to a statement from Uzbekistan Airways, an Egypt's airplane flying from Cairo to Beijing has been forced to make an emergency landing in Uzbekistan due to a bomb threat. The statement further explained that all 118 passengers and 17 crew on board the Airbus A330 were evacuated at Orange International Airport in the east of the country. For now, there has been no comment from Egypt Air on the incident, but Egyptian officials told the Associated Press news agency that an anonymous caller had telephoned security agents at Cairo's airport to say a bomb was on board the flight to Beijing. What a scary situation. Let's get the latest from Edward Yeranian of the VOA. Thank you so much for speaking to us on Network Africa.
My pleasure, Adeshala.
Is this a horse? What more do we know about this incident?
Well, it's been resolved. The plane was allowed to take off and left for Beijing, which was its original destination. I think it's the sort of thing that happens after you have a crash, after 911 in the U.S., there were a lot of crank calls threatening bombs on planes. So I think this is sort of a standard tactic after there's an accident or a crash. In terms of actually extrapolating to guess what was going on here, I mean, I won't just tell you what people are saying, what the analysts and what just ordinary people are saying. I think the goal is to wreck the economy, as we've said before in previous discussions over other issues. You have a portion of the population which supports the Muslim Brotherhood. They're angry that they were thrown out of office, and they'd like to come back. So they're doing everything they can to wreck the economy. And they've targeted just about everything, from the national airline to the central bank to tourism to relations with friendly countries like Russia, like France, like Italy. So I think it's pretty much more of the same.
Edward, if I hear you correctly, you're saying that this is politically motivated against the Egyptian government.
Well, I can't say for certain, but if I were guessing, I'd say there's probably a 95% probability that that's what's happening here, yeah.
So this incident has got some analysts trying to establish a connection between what probably happened today and what happened with flight MS-804. What do you say to that?
Well, that's probably true. I think the aviation minister, the day of the crash, indicated that the probability was that it was a terror incident. And while we still don't have anything concrete to back that up, I think that's what most people are thinking. And if you look at the media, they're consistently trying to write bad things about Egypt. Just look at the wire agencies. Tourism has been decimated. I mean, I suppose it has. There's a report saying that it was down by 54%, so I guess the word is correct. But they continue to use other, other negative reporting words like the insurgency is raging in the Sinai. I wouldn't say it's raging. I'd say it's sputtering, pretty much sputtering off and on at a very low level. So, there seems to be some intention to affect negatively the economy.
Well, thank you so much, Edward Yeranian, with the latest for us from Cairo. Thank you.
My pleasure.
According to reports from Amnesty International, there has been a surge in killings of people with albinism. The report also states that the body parts are being used in ritual practices and has exposed a systematic failure of policing in Malawi, thereby subjecting the group to a life of fear.
An increase in the number of attacks on people with albinism in Malawi since late 2014 by people seeking their body parts for witchcraft prompted Amnesty International to call for authorities to do more to punish those responsible. According to the human rights group, April was the bloodiest month for attacks on albinos in the southern African nation, with 4 people murdered, including a 2-year-old child. The child's father and 4 others have been arrested. In the past 19 months, authorities in Malawi have recorded the murders of 18 albinos and abduction of 5 others, although Amnesty fears the real number is likely to be higher, as many attacks in secretive rituals in rural areas are never reported.
People with albinism in Malawi, they live in fear of attacks by criminal gangs and sometimes family members. There's a general belief within Malawian society that the remains of persons with albinism contain magical powers. Some people believe that they contain gold, and as a result, they are targeted for their body parts.
Women and children are said to be the most vulnerable because they are considered soft targets by attackers. Agnes Jonathan cares for two of her nieces with albinism. Her cousin, a man she says she considered her brother, tried to abduct the youngest one. Chakupatsa, but was stopped by people in the village and taken to the police. 3 men came to the house while I was gone and started beating the older child, Agnes. Another snatched the youngest one, Chakupatsa, and started running into the bush. At least 69 crimes against people with albinism have been documented in Malawi since November 2014, according to police reports. The Amnesty report came ahead of International Albinism Awareness Day on June the 13th. Along with calling on the government to adopt specific measures to protect people with albinism, like increasing police presence in rural areas and swift prosecution of perpetrators, Amnesty is also urging for more attention and resources towards supporting vulnerable albino populations.
Many learners with albinism fail in school because they don't have the appropriate devices to enable them to read. They experience bullying. They also experience social exclusion in their own communities. Right now, since the attacks started, families and people with albinism are terrified for their children, to the extent that some children have dropped out of school because of fear of abductions and killings.
Albinism is a congenital disorder affecting between 1 in 5,000 and 1 in 15,000 people in sub-Saharan Africa. It affects about 1 in 20,000 people in Europe and North Africa. Attacks against people with albinism have occurred elsewhere in southern and eastern Africa, including in Mozambique, South Africa, Tanzania, and Burundi.
Weeks after promoting his son to Major General in the Ugandan military, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has handed his wife a lucrative post in his new cabinet. The 71-year-old leader, who was re-elected for a 5th consecutive time in controversial circumstances in February, announced the makeup of his cabinet of ministers earlier this week. The First Lady had until recently been Minister for Karamoja Affairs, a sub-region in northeast Uganda. She has now been promoted to the post of Education and Sports Minister, a coveted role that commands a large chunk of Uganda's annual budget. When we come back after the break, we have analysis of this move by President Yoweri Museveni by Uganda's renowned journalist Joshua Poro. He joins me on the show to join us again.